This is Writers Not Writing, the show where you can get to know your favorite writers and soon-to-be favorite writers by listening to them confess to the ways they procrastinate. Thanks for procrastinating with us. I'm Benjamin Gorman, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff. Doug tries his best to make me sound better. And each week we have a secret word to listen for. If you catch it, you earn the right to take an extra break at the time of your choosing from whatever is stressing you out. From NotAPipePublishing, welcome to Writers Not Writing. Today's secret word is tutus.
If I take my time.
Hail and well met, readers and reviewers. We don't have a special guest today. If you want guests, though, wait till next week's show. It is our 100th episode, and I can't tell you all the guests because they would take all of this show just to name them all. It's going to be a star-studded celebration, and if any of you have ever thrown a party, you know what you need to do beforehand is clean. Clean, clean, clean to get ready for throwing a party. So that's what I have been doing to prepare for the 100th episode is cleaning up because we're going to have so many guests on the next episode. So Doug and I are the only guests for this one, and we have been cleaning together. Doug is in his traditional cleaning attire, the black sweats that have got the bleach stains on them, like those, and then the gray sweatshirt with, that color of gray that wants to take on every single possible stain. I'm not knocking it. That's your cleaning clothes. I've got my gray sweats on, and I've got this formerly white t-shirt on that if you do enough dusting and that kind of thing, you end up with these kinds of marks. So I apologize to the YouTube viewers. And then, of course, I have these very, very bright yellow rubber gloves that I was using to, protect my hands from the cleaning supplies for cleaning the grout in the tiles in the kitchen and cleaning the sink and cleaning the toilets. I mean, there's going to be a lot of guests. You got to have, everything prepared. So house is looking good. Study behind me clearly is not, because this will not be where the party is located. So getting all ready for that. So I do have some events that I'm looking forward to. I always ask authors when they're on the show what's going on with them, and they've got some big book launch or something. Well, my big things that I am looking for are not mine personally. This Saturday, which I probably, Doug, have I done the whole time travel bit before? So if any of you are into time travel stories, they're not my favorite kinds. I'm not a time travel fan. Sometime I'll go off about why I don't like time travel in literature, but time travel is something we all experience. Heard this really fascinating fact about that. Your brain literally modifies your conception of time, because otherwise you're so sensitive. Your amazing brain is so sensitive, it can distinguish between, for example, the feeling of when you say step on a stick and you make that stick crack. The sensation travels at the speed of electricity through your nerves to your brain and is interpreted faster than the sound passes to your ears and then is interpreted. And so your brain is constantly reevaluating time and creating this time that is unique to you, that's kind of in between all the sensory input, and matching all that stuff together. And that's an evolutionary development, because otherwise you would step on a stick and then a microsecond later you would hear that stick break, and your ancient ancestor, if they couldn't have modulated time in that way, would have thought someone was sneaking up on them. They would think there's a second stick. I broke one, but also there's one that broke behind me clearly because I heard it, right? And so you need to be able to put all of these sensory inputs together into a time which does not exist. You are constantly a time traveler. I just don't like time travel stories because I feel like if somebody can manipulate time It lowers the stakes in the story. Why didn't they go back 5 minutes earlier and solve the problem? So the only time travel stories I can really get into have some mechanism within them which explains why the protagonist can't actually control time. Because if people can control time, I feel like it creates a situation where you then need a whiteboard in your story. And I think that's to be avoided. It just lends itself to terrible exposition and the stakes being undermined. Not a time travel fan. But when it comes to podcasts, it is kind of cool that you are listening to this in my future. And I am experiencing this in your past. So, for example, this Saturday, to me, I am going to go to the launch party for Beth Gibbs Pacific Northwest. Excited about this party. It's going to be at this bar or pub that I have never been to before called 13th Moon, so I can't tell you about the place itself beyond saying that it must be cool because they support authors. They're hosting this party. So I'll go to this place up in Portland, 13th Moon on Saturday, and celebrate with Beth Gibbs. And that's in your present, that was a cool party that I got to attend in my future on Saturday. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that. You're looking back on that. Um, and then the thing that will be concurrent for the two of us is that beginning after that party, we've started this book club called the Indulge Your Shelf Book Club. And beginning after that party, when the readers have the books, right? The folks who have joined the Indulge Your Shelf Book Club will begin our discussion of the book. And I'm really looking forward to that as well. Now, that is limited to the people who are members of the Indulge Your Shelf Book Club. So if you are interested, there'll be an ad for it and there'll be a link in the show notes and that kind of thing. Check it out. I think that's going to be a really fun community we're going to try and start where people can come together around books that they are interested in. And we'll begin discussing Beth Gibbs' Pacific North Witch, which is just, I mean, right from the title, you know that's going to be a cool book. So the Pacific North Witch discussion starts this coming Saturday. I am excited to see how that community develops over time. And if you would like to get involved, again, you can sign up and you can get a book a month and you can participate in those discussions. I think that'll be a lot of fun. So that's the positive in my near future. I always ask authors what is a favorite distraction that is keeping them away from their writing. I don't have a favorite distraction other than the Beth's party, but the thing that has been really keeping me away from my work is the upcoming election, and I you know waffled about whether or not I would talk about it on the show, not because I avoid talking about politics. I actually resent a little bit when people say, "Oh, I don't talk politics." I'm like, "Oh, that's a remarkable amount of privilege you are confessing there. Politics, doesn't care whether or not you want to talk about it. It wants to affect you, and it affects people with less power more than you. And I think we all have an obligation to care about politics because it's a means, it's an expression of caring about the people around us." And caring about the society we all share. So I think it's really important to be politically engaged. There is a degree to which it can be unhealthy in terms of your stress level, because you are taking on concerns about things that you have very limited power over. And so I understand when people need to take a break, and I envy them. I'm terrible at that. And so I have been very, very, very stressed about this upcoming election. So I thought about not even bringing it up on the show, even though we've talked about politics on the show before. This is nothing new, but I considered not discussing it. And then I feel like if I don't, I'm going to kick myself because we all ought to be talking a lot more about this election. Hard as that is to hear, to believe we could possibly be talking about this any more than we are. But if things go the way that I am worried they're going to go, we're going to wish we talked about this a lot more. And the one thing that I find the most galling is the idea of mass deportations. So one of our candidates, Donald Trump, has been talking about deporting 20 million people. And I think his numbers are all over the place. The guy not only feels no obligation to tell the truth, he can't even hold a particular lie in his mind, but he does talk about deporting 20 million people. And this is not getting nearly the coverage it ought to because people aren't doing the math, and those that are doing the math don't care. I think there are a small number of people who really want 20 million people to be deported. I hope, I hope that is the case. But the vast majority of us have not thought through what that entails. So we have a candidate saying that he wants to deport 20 million people from the United States. There are between 13 and 15 million people who are going through the process or have not yet completed the process to become citizens of the United States who are residents in the United States. 13 to 15 million. So stop and think about the difference. Your basic math. That's 5 to 7 million people who are citizens of this country that Donald Trump is telling you he wants to deport. He is also talking frequently now about the enemies within. Who do you think makes up the 5 to 7 million people who are citizens of this country that he wants to deport? Now let's give him more benefit of the doubt than he possibly deserves and say, what if he just doesn't believe that there's 13 to 15 million and he actually believes there are another 5 to 7 million people who are undocumented in this country? So if we limit it to that and we don't think about the possibility of 5 to 7 million enemies within that he wants to deport, let's say it's just undocumented people. Being in this country and not yet having your citizenship, whether that's overstaying a visa, which is the most common means by which someone finds themselves here. It's not that they walked across a border. It's that they came in completely legally with a visa and overstayed that either tourist visa, student visa, whatever. That is the most common way. That is a misdemeanor. A misdemeanor. It is not a felony. Donald Trump knows what felonies are. He's committed a lot of felonies. It is a misdemeanor offense. Whether you cross at the border without permission or whether you overstay a visa, it is a misdemeanor offense, like jaywalking. So imagine if somebody said, I want to identify all the people in the country who have ever jaywalked. Let's create a list. And that list has 13 million people on it. And then the person stood up at a podium and said, let's deport 20 million jaywalkers. There aren't 20 million. There are 13 million. But he said, I want to deport 20 million jaywalkers, but only the ones with brown skin who come from countries I don't like, countries I have referred to as shitholes. What would you think of the person who says, let's deport all the people who have committed jaywalking who have brown skin? Now, I don't think it's constructive to simply label a person a racist. I tell my students, I encourage them to avoid it. And the reason for that is it obscures the fact that we all live in a country that is plagued by a racist system. We all participate in that. And so if you want to get into who's a racist, it's not actually constructive because we all are to some degree, right? We have these ideas that we've been, immersed in our entire lives. People of color have negative ideas about themselves, internalized racism. White people certainly benefit from white supremacy, even if it's just the land we're standing on. We all engage in racism. So calling a person a racist isn't particularly constructive. But if someone said to you, I want to deport everyone who's jaywalked and has brown skin, what would you think of that person? Okay, now let's follow this thought experiment one step further. There's someone standing behind that person cheering. What do you think of that person? Now, you thought it. I didn't call that person a racist. But I also think we need to take more time to think about this idea of mass deportation in terms of what it would actually entail. Because let's say that Donald Trump is wildly off in his numbers and only rounds up 2 or 3 million people per year over the course of his 4 years, 12 million people over the course of his presidency. Where is he going to put those people? Because even if their governments said, okay, those people can come back, which they will not, but even if those governments did, you cannot teleport 2 million people per year. You're going to have to find them. You're going to have to round them up. We're talking kicking in doors. We're talking ripping babies away from their mothers again, the way he did last time, so that the mothers can be deported and the children, what? Those children are American citizens. So when those 2 million, this is a number that is hard for us to fathom. When those millions of people are rounded up, where are they going to go? You're going to have to build camps. Camps where everyone in the camp has a commonality. And the commonality is not the nation of their birth, although that would still technically qualify as a concentration camp. But Donald Trump does not want to round up Canadians who have overstayed their visas. He does not want to round up Norwegians who have overstayed their visas. He does not want to round up his wife who overstayed her visa at one point and was in this country undocumented before she got her citizenship. That's not who he's out to get. So everyone in those camps will be the people that he talks about all the time, people from Latin America, people from Africa, right? And those are the continents he focuses on are South America and Africa, Central America, Mexico. He talks a lot about the Congo. He's kind of obsessed with the Congo. Um, so if you've got a camp full of people whose commonality is that the person who is dictator on day one has determined that their skin color dictates that they go to a camp, that is a concentration camp by definition. I am not being hyperbolic. The man is standing up and telling you he wants to build concentration camps based on race. I am having a really hard time right now dealing with not Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a weak, pathetic little man. Petty, small, narcissistic person. What is frightening to me is that leaders of all kinds, regardless of their affiliation, their politics, the leader should not be our focus. It's the social forces that elevate those people. There is a demand in this country that has created Donald Trump. And we need to own that. There's no Donald Trump without your neighbor with the Trump sign. And I'm having a really hard time living amongst the people who want to build concentration camps in the desert and deport 20 million people. I think we also really need to think about what those camps will become. Because Donald Trump, and worse, Stephen Miller, the architect of his deportation plan, will take it as a mandate that these people are not cared about by the people that Donald Trump cares about. And Donald Trump has told us who he cares about. When there were forest fires in California, and he believed that California, by virtue of being a blue state, was entirely filled with people who were Democrats, his attitude was, let this state burn. So Donald Trump is not going to say, oh, well, there were 48 or 49% of the population who voted for Kamala Harris. I guess I really should moderate my positions. If Donald Trump wins, he's going to say, everybody who I care about doesn't care about these people. Which means when those 20 million people are in camps in the desert and their countries say, we're not taking them back, will Donald Trump or Stephen Miller care whether those people live or die? We have somebody running for president who is telling you he is willing to kill 20 million people. He doesn't care. Now, maybe he has not thought that through even that far. Stephen Miller has. But maybe Donald Trump thinks I can stand up here and whatever gets an applause line. So I just exaggerate the numbers and I say, I'm going to deport all these people you don't like. But there are enough people in his base who cheer for that. Remember, it's the people, it's the social conditions that create the leader, not the leader that creates the social conditions, right? He is responding to the cheers. And that I'm having a really hard time just living in the United States over the course of this election, knowing that it may be more than half of the people around us who are comfortable enough with building concentration camps for 20 million people in which those people could die. And they're fine with it. And so I acknowledge I am looking at the people around me with the Trump flags and I'm going, it's very hard for me not to see those folks in the same way I would see somebody who is walking around saying, yay, the Holocaust was great. Or even, I don't care if it happens here. I think it's, when I'm being more generous, I think it's really more that, right? I don't care as long as my side wins. For a lot of these folks, it's not conscious. But the impact, for those of you listening on the podcast, I'm showing my tattoo. Impact is greater than intent. These people are telling us they are willing to allow somebody to be in power who is telling us he's willing to put 20 million people in camps in the desert. That's really, really been tough for me. Now, I am not going to persuade anyone, right? I recognize that. People just look at me and they're like, look at this ridiculous looking liberal. They're not, I don't have any kind of, pundit platform. There's a handful of you going, oh, okay, yeah, I listen to your writer show. Right? You talk to writers. Who cares what you think? And I acknowledge that. I am not persuading anybody. But maybe you could, if you know somebody and they're saying, I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence, please say to them, the guy's talking about building camps in the desert where 20 million people could die. Are you okay with that? No, of course not. Sure, I'm not okay with that. But what? But he's not really going to do it, which means you're voting for a leader you consider to be ineffectual but entertaining. And the entertainment is that he talks about getting rid of 20 million people. So if this is something that you can articulate to someone that maybe is on the fence, please, again, I would kick myself if I didn't say something. I think we all need to say something, uh, and say it on the record. Put it on your social media. Put it in a place where you can look back and say, I spoke out before 20 million people were dying in the desert. I said something. I tried. Your vote is great. Your vote is not enough. You've got to talk to other voters. You've got to scream it from the mountaintops. You've got to tell people. This guy's talking about killing 20 million people. I think we also need to talk to this other group, who are the folks who are so far to the left of me, that I have read these folks writing, I don't want to have blood on my hands, so I'm gonna check out. And we need to talk to those folks too. And we need to say, look, I know you don't want to be made to feel guilty, but we all have blood on our hands. You live in the United States. You pay taxes. You're complicit already. So, in that context, where your choices, whether your choice is not to vote or to vote for Jill Stein or to vote for Donald Trump, the consequences are still blood on your hands. You cannot escape that. There is no way to escape your complicity in the society in which you live. Literally no way. You could die and you still participate. Your money goes through a process of escrow and then is distributed according to the rules of the society in which you live. You will participate in this society. And a no vote does not absolve you of any responsibility. A vote for Kamala Harris diminishes your responsibility for the 20 million people who will die in the desert otherwise. It doesn't mean that you've magically made the war in Gaza come to a complete halt. I don't think Kamala Harris could do that if she wanted to. Even if she's elected president of the United States, she is not elected prime minister of Israel. Could she do more? Possibly. She exists, again, within a social milieu, right? There are limits to what a president can accomplish and be the representative of the people of the United States. Because I would say more than 50% of the people of the United States are afraid to say, hey, what the Israeli government is doing is abhorrent. They're afraid to say it because they're afraid to seem like they're saying, I don't support Jewish people. They've been made to feel that. I say this as someone who is Jewish. To be opposed to the actions of the Israeli government is not anti-Semitic. And yet, I think there are a lot of people who are afraid to say this must stop. And I don't know that the president would have the leverage to even do that if she wanted to. But I believe she's far more likely to try than Donald Trump. And our leftist friends who are saying, I refuse to engage, absolutely will have blood on their hands, just like all the rest of us. Whichever way this election goes down, we are all responsible. You are responsible for the result, even if you lose. That's scary. That is hard, right? But you can say, I did what I could to prevent it, and I failed. And I live amongst people who wanted this, whether this is a continuation of the war in Gaza or 20 million people dying in the desert. We have to own it. And so, as you can imagine, when you're hearing me say this, I'm an emotional wreck. I am very, very worried about what's going to happen. I'm worried that even if President Harris wins, Vice President Harris is elected president, I'm worried about violence after the election. I'm worried about The Big Lie Part Two. I'm an emotional wreck. And yet, I think there's no excuse for silence, right? I need to say something. So if there's somebody you can talk to who's going to be far more likely to be persuaded by you than by me, please let them know. These are the stakes. How will they look back on being complicit in 20 million people dying in the desert? Oh, yeah, that's a lot. I won't pretend that this is light or a nice even transition. I am gonna Doug, I'm going to pitch to you. I'm going to pitch to the ad break. Please start playing that music. When we come back, I am going to read my story from the Magic We Miss anthology. You've heard the other authors that I've been interviewing, and they've gotten to read some samples of theirs, and I've got a story in there too. That will be more fun than listening to me talk about this election, but I had to say something. We have to say something. Special announcement time. NotAPipePublishing has always been committed to helping authors and readers find one another. Well, this show, which is all about helping readers get to know writers, just hit a milestone. 10,000 views on YouTube. So to celebrate, instead of charging authors to advertise their books on the show, I'm going to run your ads for free throughout 2024. If you want to make a 30 to 60 second video about your book, let folks know what it's about and where to find it, and don't forget your name and the title. I'll run one or two of those in our ad spot each week. Just send an MP4 file to the NotAPipe email address in the show notes. Let's fix up some readers and authors into reader relationships. 2024. More readers, more writers, more books.
You deserve a vacation.
How about a trip to a dude ranch on a colony planet?
Or a journey to a universe where wizards call lightning down from the sky and calm rumbling volcanoes?
Or a holiday tour of the major cities of Europe with vampires and werewolves and witches as guides.
Or maybe just a nice hot sudsy bath with a book of poetry that will make you cry and sigh and laugh.
We've got you covered.
A paperback will appear on your doorstep each month to whisk you away, and you'll return refreshed, enlightened, and ready to make the world we share a brighter place for everyone.
Or if you prefer, you can sign up for a quarterly subscription and get 4 YA titles, 4 adult titles, or 4 collections of poetry per year.
Plus, you'll get book club questions from the author before you start the book and an interview with the author afterwards.
So, if you are in a book group or want to start one, this is everything you need in a kit. Will we occasionally throw in some extra surprises just to say thank you to our members? Of course.
You can also give someone their very own membership with all of the rights and privileges pertaining thereto.
So, find a reward level that's right for you.
And share this with your friends.
Join the Indulge Your Shelf book club today. Your bookshelves deserve a little pampering.
Hi, I'm children's author Sarah Geddes. I'd love for you to check out my book, Henry the Sneezing Dragon. It's about a clumsy dragon in search of friendship. My book, To the Moon, a Jacob and Trevor adventure, will be released September 2024, a story about 2 little boys who use fairy dust to travel to the moon. And in fall 2024, The Water Bear Astronaut, about a tardigrade who travels to space, will also be coming out. All books will be available on Amazon.
I'm Mary Kendall. I'm a fiction writer. I write stories that are weird, odd, gothic-y, a little bit left off center. What is this? This is my latest release, Bottled Secrets of Rosewood. It's billed as a contemporary gothic thriller, and it's being touted as a page-turner by people that are reading it. It was inspired by a real-life find, a blue bottle that was uncovered in an archaeology dig outside of Williamsburg, Virginia. The bottle was discovered to be a witch bottle. Witch bottles were a thing back in the day. They were filled with items such as thorns, clippings, glass chips to draw out evil intent from the person holding the bottle. Sound interesting? You can find out more at my website, marykendallauthor.com, or if you'd like to buy the book, it's available where all books are sold.
I apologize for the transition to the ad break. I'm sure that was pretty jarring. So welcome back. I'm glad you're here. Doug, glad to have you here. So Doug was asking me about how this story came about. And I was telling him I was writing the third installment of the trilogy that I'm currently writing. I have finished the third book in manuscript form. That will be published hopefully this next summer. So those were the characters that were living inside of my head when I got an email from Brian Parker asking me if I would like to write a story for this anthology, The Magic We Miss, that he's put together. And that was in and of itself, a really cool moment for me. It's only happened to me a couple of times in my career as a writer where somebody has reached out and said, you don't have to submit. You don't have to query. You don't have to ask. I want a piece from you. And that was a really cool moment. And I think writers out there can empathize with, what a relief that is to get that kind of request for your work. It meant a great deal to me just in that moment by itself. So I got this email from Brian, and I was very excited to write a story, and he told me a little bit about the idea for the anthology, which those of you who've heard the last few episodes know this is the idea is that there is magic around us if we can only see it. We can only take the time and have the eyes to see it. And he wanted a story about somebody discovering some magic in our midst in Portland, specifically in Portland, where he lives and where most of the authors live. Although some of the authors, Joachim Sohn, who was on the last show, is writing from Germany. Writers out of Montreal. We've got writers from different places, but they all set their stories in the greater Portland area. So I had these characters in mind from my trilogy, and so I decided I would write a story that continues their story. I should acknowledge this is a tiny bit of a spoiler, only in that if you have heard this story, then you know that these characters must survive book 3 because this takes place after it. So if there was any kind of suspense about would any of them die in book 3, well, now you know that they are still alive. They are still extant at the end, canonically. They are not extant, literally. Doug is laughing at that. This is a story that I wrote specifically for this anthology, but about the characters from Don't Read This Book, You Were Warned, and the third part of that trilogy, which will be titled You People Are Monsters. This is for The Magic We Miss anthology. It's titled The Magic Carpet of PDX. In 1987, the Disney Corporation decided the world needed an answer to the burning question, what should one do to properly celebrate a Super Bowl victory? So they stuck a camera in the face of Phil Simms, the quarterback of the New York Giants, and he said, I'm going to Disney World. Simms received $75,000, as did John Elway, in case the Denver Broncos won the game, and the game's 87.2 million viewers were taught that if they should ever find themselves with some free time, some wealth, and something momentous to celebrate, they should plan a trip to Orlando. Now, Magdalena Wallace, the greatest writer in history, was answering the question absolutely no one was asking. What does one do after saving the entire human race and all of monsterdom from a giant eldritch horror bent on annihilating humanity? Like Phil Simms, she had time to kill and no financial limitations which might prohibit her from going anywhere. She'd never been much of a Disney fan, and the amusement park closes at 11 p.m., which doesn't give a vampire a lot of time to enjoy it. Instead, Lena floated the idea of taking her girlfriend and some of her newfound friends back to Oregon to see where she'd grown up. No one had a better suggestion, and Belle seemed almost giddy about a secret surprise she promised to show them along the way to Lena's old stomping grounds. So, after the victory in Saigon and some paperwork that had to be filled out in Las Vegas, Lena got onto a private plane with Belle, their non-binary golem friend Yosef, Tina the teenage werewolf, and Napoleon, the reanimated skeleton they'd rescued from Discovery after his rebirth in the catacombs of Paris. They were like kids in school who were trying to find an excuse to continue hanging out after the group project had been presented. Traveling by plane was always a bit tricky for a group with such varying identities. Lena and Belle, as vampires, couldn't risk flying commercial during the day. If a fellow passenger opened a window, they would both start screaming and smoking, behaviors frowned upon by major airlines. Napoleon, safe from the sun, had to wear human clothes stuffed with something, generally more clothes, and a full motorcycle helmet to cover his exposed skull in order to travel in public. While that might have earned him nothing but strange looks from his fellow passengers, the TSA employees at the gate would certainly have asked him to lift the visor when showing the identification he did not possess, and then the jig would have been up. Yosef the Golem could alter its body size and density enough to fit in Lena's backpack. Yosef was the perfect traveling companion. Tina the werewolf could maintain her human form and travel at any time of the day or night, but thanks to her particular personality, there was always a chance she'd snap at a fellow passenger she found irritating. And her snapping was quite literal. Instead of taking unnecessary risks, Belle arranged for a private flight. One of the advantages of being an 800-year-old and having no moral qualms about robbing the people she killed was that Belle had more money than Lena could fathom. Lena, a baby vampire of only 1 year, was still adjusting to the whole murder aspect, and after draining someone, she was often too disgusted with herself to remember to rifle through the pockets of a corpse for cash and credit cards. The plane had a human crew, so the women found it easiest to stuff Napoleon in a large rolling suitcase and ask Yosef to hide in Lena's backpack. The skeleton and golem didn't express any objection to these arrangements. Of course, neither of them could speak. Yosef had no mouth, and Napoleon had no tongue or lips. But they could communicate quite clearly, between exaggerated movements and little notepads both carried to write messages, and neither bothered as much as a headshake. When the small jet touched down in Portland and taxied to a space in front of a small hangar, the group climbed down the short staircase onto the tarmac and waited. Belle called an Uber, and then got to work making hotel reservations. The others engaged in their favorite time-filling behaviors. Yosef remained in Lena's backpack and contemplated whether or not all 6,828 uses of the tetragrammaton in the Tanakh are in present, future, and imperfect tense, as well as the first-person singular imperfect aspect. Napoleon stayed in Belle's large rolling suitcase, almost all his bones immobilized except a single hand holding a cell phone aimed at his skull so he could tap the screen. He used an online language program to try and learn English. He would never be able to speak it without lips or tongue, but he wanted to understand his friends without making Lena translate into Spanish or Belle into German, the languages he somehow remembered from his life before reanimation. Lena smoked a cigarette. It was a bad habit, but she knew it couldn't harm her now that she was a vampire. The scent of the smoke repulsed Tina. Her werewolf sense of smell was even more sensitive than her two vampire friends, and though she generally admired anything rebellious, she was of a generation which recognized cigarettes are not edgy. They'd merely been new branding mechanisms once the claim that they were medicinal had fallen apart. Tina particularly resented corporate attempts to manipulate her by selling her rebellion for a profit. And the cigarette smelled gross. She stood upwind, tapping on her phone, catching up on the gossip in monster chat rooms. When the Uber pulled up, Belle put her suitcase, with Napoleon inside, in the Nissan's trunk, then alluded to her plan when she told the driver, "We need to make a stop before we go to the hotel." "We do?" Lena asked. She thought Belle might be feeling peckish. Cab drivers were a kind of fast food for vampires. "Not what you think," Belle said. While Tina and Lena climbed in back, Belle slid into the front seat and told the driver, "We need to go to the airport, just for a minute, then go to our hotel. You can swing us around to the departures level and wait for us? On the dock, of course." Belle, a progressive feminist white vampire, prided herself on her ability to not make judgments about the man based on the fact that he was black. Instead, she made incorrect assumptions based on the fact that he was driving an Uber. For example, she presumed he was only an Uber driver, since that was his function in her life, and if she'd been pressed to guess at his other jobs, it would have taken her approximately 7,000 guesses to discover he was an associate professor at Portland State University, a successful illustrator and author, and the co-owner of a publishing company. In a city with rents as high as Portland's, One job rarely kept a roof over a person's head. Sure, I might not be able to park, but I can do loops until you're ready to go. The driver, Brian, also made incorrect assumptions about his fare. For example, he presumed Belle was a human woman from England, and not a vampire from a country that became a part of Wales before Wales became part of the UK. He didn't guess the white woman next to him was in a relationship with the black woman with the natural hair in the rear passenger side seat, but he would have been even more surprised to find out that the black woman was an Oregonian than a lesbian, since Oregon's history made black people rarer than queer folk. He might have guessed the Asian woman sitting behind him was significantly younger than her friends, but he never would have considered the formula to calculate her age would be complicated by a combination of superhuman and dog years. Why do we need to go to the departures section? The young and also not so young werewolf asked. Brian wondered the same thing, but he didn't want to second guess his fare. You'll see, Belle said. Brian took them from the tarmac to a road which provided frontage for a more major street and was uncreatively named Frontage Road, then turned onto an arguably even less creatively named road, Airport Way. A lane change to the left kept the car from exiting into long-term parking, and then a slight merge to the right sent them up a 3-lane ramp to the street curving in front of the second-story departure level. Brian pointed to some open spaces and said, I can drop you off and wait there for a minute, and if you wave me on, I'll just drive around the loop and pick you up when you come back to the curb. Sound good? Thanks. This'll only take a minute, Belle said. She hopped out at the curve and waved Lena and Tina to join her, flapping her hand in an excited circle, smiling more effusively than she normally allowed herself. Lena sent a conspiratorial frown Tina's way, but she couldn't hide the smile curling up into her cheeks. Her girlfriend's joy tickled her. While Tina and Lena climbed out of the car, Belle grabbed a suitcase containing Napoleon from the trunk. When Lena raised an eyebrow, Belle said, Oh, this is an everybody thing. You've got Yosef, right? Lena answered by hauling on her backpack strap and making the bag bounce against her lower back. She didn't carry the pack as religiously as she used to, when it had contained the magical tomes capable of ending civilization, but she'd grown accustomed to the pack's presence and couldn't imagine traveling without it. Belle knew this, so the question served as a sign. This surprise was distracting Belle in a way that made Lena increasingly amused and curious. The front entrance of the terminal opened via room-sized revolving doors, which sat still until motion sensors told them a person was present, then made slow turns allowing people to pass through with luggage in tow. The group made it through in a single rotation, the 3 women carrying the golem and skeleton with them. Inside, Belle seemed to be heading with purpose beyond the United self-check-in terminals toward the Alaskan desks, when she stopped, looked up at the ceiling, scanned the floor for the directions of her multiple shadows — she did cast shadows, just as she did have a reflection in mirrors — and then looked back at her friends. Here is good. Here is what? Tina asked. The magic carpet. When the main terminal of Portland International Airport opened in 1957, it had a terrazzo flooring, a style that was already going out of fashion, but which had been very popular in the 40s. Metal frames separated areas which were filled with an epoxy resin, and then bits of mica, marble, quartz, and granite were sprinkled on and allowed to sink in. Though the beauty is debatable, they were highly functional, easy to clean, and loud. In 1987, the Port of Portland, the political entity governing the airport, commissioned a company called SRG Partnership to design a carpet to cut down on the cacophony in the vast, echoing terminal. This Portland-based design and architecture firm had an excellent reputation, 15 years of experience, and, unbeknownst to the humans selecting their bid, a group of designers consisting of a warlock, a witch, 2 werewolves who were a gay couple and very out about it for 1985, though understandably closeted about being werewolves, and, most importantly for this project, a djinn named Jerry. The company got the contract on the merits. No enchantment necessary, but once they had the job, the designers went to work imbuing the carpet with magical properties. The werewolves, the youngest and most professional members of the team, were committed to coming up with a stylish design and a functional material product. But the warlock, witch, and djinn were centuries old, certainly didn't need the money, and were only employed in human jobs because they enjoyed opportunities to make magical mischief. The witch and warlock worked on spells to create localized effects in the carpet, spots which would cause slips, places that could raise and lower on their own to make suitcases seem to jump, areas which would always feel wet no matter how dry they were, or places which would shift in color just slowly enough to cause headaches but never be identifiable to a human. Jerry wanted to try something more ambitious. Carpets were Jin's area of specialty, the flying variety being only the most famous. For PDX, Jerry crafted a rune in the design of the carpet itself. It seemed like a star made out of dots and dashes, blue and pink on a teal background, merely decorative, a bit odd. But it was actually an ancient symbol, in a long-forgotten language, which could attract a specific kind of invisible, magical insect. These creatures, called Bibigwish Ashnaknan, which means little fire beings in Ojibwe, would infest the carpet and do whatever it is they did to humans. Jerry didn't really know or care what they did. He just liked the idea of causing an infestation. But the carpet at PDX became famous because the Bibi Guish Wishkanan, instead of being harmful pests, turned out to be beneficial. Once a traveler brought some on their shoe from the Bibi Washkanan's native home to the north-central Midwest, they latched onto the rune in the carpet, bred and spread throughout the airport. As travelers passed over them, they would climb out of the thin carpet, dance about on the person's shoes, and deposit excess magic, which created a mild sense of euphoria and sometimes imbued the airline passengers with advantageous properties, like slightly increased hopefulness, charisma, or wit. The humans, unaware of this magic, attributed the benefits to the relaxation of a good vacation, good luck on a business trip, or the joy that comes from returning to or escaping from family. In 2013, the carpet was replaced by one which lacked the rune, and some of the Bubishwishkanan did leave, but others migrated to the new carpet and maintained their magical community. Belle explained this to her friends as they stood in a small circle on the new carpet. Wait, Tina said. Excess magic? You mean like they have more magic than they need, and... Yep, Belle said, grinning. The little fire beings are very powerful for their size, and they can't use all their own magic. They can't even contain it, so they excrete it on the feet of passers-by. Lena raised an eyebrow. Excrete? Exactly. Magic poop. You walk on this carpet, and tiny magical bugs will drop magical poop on your feet. Humans can't see the little fire beings, but they have this vague sense something cool is going on. Cool? Tina demanded. They're getting pooped on. Magic poop, Belle repeated. So the humans have developed this fad of taking selfies of their feet over the carpet. For some, it's a way to share that they're about to go on a trip. Others just collect the pictures. It's a kind of innocuous, it's a kind of unconscious religious rite. They don't know what exactly is going on, but they can feel it's something special, and they want to memorialize it with a ritual. Very human. So they take feet selfies on the carpet, and we should too. Maybe one of us will get some magical ability from being here. Who knows? But we should definitely get a picture. Ew, Tina said. Document that we're being pooped on? This sounds like a weird kink. But she was obviously joking, because she pulled out her phone out of her pocket and aimed it at their feet. Wait, Belle said, we need to all get in the shot, and that's going to be a little risky for our friends. Yosef, can you stay mostly invisible but just make one foot visible? Lena pulled off her pack and opened it, unscrewed the lid of the plastic bottle, where the golem voluntarily placed itself for travel, and waited to see if it would perhaps fill the mouth of the backpack with its head to nod or shake an answer. Instead, Yosef swirled up out of the bottle completely and resolved in its full-sized form, but invisible to humans, and vampires and werewolves for that matter. Then it placed a huge sandstone foot into the circle among the women's shoes, and it made that one appear. Meanwhile, Belle unzipped her rolling suitcase and whispered into it in German. Napoleon's skeleton foot slid out of the aperture in the unzipped bag with a tentative, languid cautiousness which made it appear particularly repulsive, slightly natal and slightly sexual and completely off-putting. But once the ball of Napoleon's foot touched the carpet, he tapped it around to find comfortable purchase in a way that was comfortingly comical and absurd. Okay, quick, before some human sees, Belle said, and the women shuffled closer together around the golem and the skeleton's feet. Tina snapped a half a dozen pictures by habit. Then, while Napoleon retracted his foot back into Belle's bag and Yosef swirled his sandy substance back into Lena's bottle, Tina squatted down to try and see the Babashwish Kanan. Can you make them out? Lena asked. Kinda, she said, uncertain. Lena joined her while Belle remained standing and scanned the huge room for overly curious humans. The crouching vampire and werewolf, their superhuman senses dialed all the way up, squinted at their feet and the teal carpet. The Bebishwishkanan were 10 times smaller than gnats, glowed like fireflies, and had no wings. Instead, their bodies, while covered by a hard carapace, were roughly hominid in shape, their two larger legs for jumping, which bent the wrong way at the knees, but were otherwise proportioned like human legs. Their shorter front legs were about the relative size of arms, their spindly torsos, thin necks, and round heads also like humans in dimensions. As the women watched, some 30 or 40 of the nearly microscopic Bebewishkanan sprang up on their shoes, leapt up into the air an inch above the toes, and spun around, their arms outstretched. As they did so, little flowing skirts of fire belled out at their waists and sprinkled even tinier motes of glowing dust onto the carpet and shoes. They aren't pooping, Tina said. She sounded both relieved and disappointed. Lena looked up at Belle. They're dancing. It's like super tiny ballet. It's beautiful. Belle shook her head. They spin when they poop. Those aren't tutus. Those are magic toots. Lena stood and took Belle's hand. Maybe they've just given you a magically heightened amount of cynicism. Belle nodded. That would explain a lot. I'm going to stick with my tiny magical ballet theory, Lena told her. I like it better. Maybe they've given you magically enhanced naivete. Lena shrugged. I'll take it. The five of them, three carrying the other two, left via the large, slowly rotating doors. Brian saw them coming and started the car, then watched their approach. He experienced the world through his artist's eyes. Too human to see the Babewishkanan, but human enough to see three friends sharing a moment which radiated warmth and camaraderie. He made a mental note of their posture, the way they connected to one another. The black woman in the middle holding hands with the white woman with pink hair, squeezing a Morse code thank you for something Brian did not know about. The white woman looking at her girlfriend with a specific tilt of her head and a stare that spoke of a consuming commitment. The black woman bumping shoulders with the younger Asian woman in a playful, sisterly way, the Asian woman looking straight ahead, but bumping her back, silently saying, I don't want to acknowledge it, but I'm very glad you just did that, and I want you to know it. There was a magic in these women's friendship Brian could almost see, like a sparkling powder around them that spun and twisted out of his vision, a fan blade disappearing when not followed, but still there, just out of sight. Brian wondered if he could reproduce even a bit of these women's friendship on paper. His hands itched for his pencils, his pens, the unique soft smoothness of each grade of parchment. He wanted to conjure this friendship, to communicate it, to gift some of that magic to his wife and sons and the wider world through his art. And that impulse, the desire to create and share what is best, but hidden by its own ubiquity, is also a kind of magic. It doesn't answer the question, what should you do after saving the world? It answers the question, what should you do that makes the world worth saving? I hope you enjoyed that. If you didn't, there will be a lot of other stories you may like better in The Magic We Miss from Believe in Wonder Publishing. And I'm going to be interviewing Brian Parker, the illustrator and one of the authors, and as you just heard, the cameo appearance in my own short story. He's one of the co-publishers at Believe in Wonder Publishing, and I'm going to be interviewing him at Powell's City of Books on November 30th. I'm going to ask the folks at Powell's if I can record that interview and make it into an episode, but they may not let me. So if you are interested in hearing the interview, mark your calendar, November 30th. I think it's like at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Mark your calendar and please come check that out. It's going to be really, really fun. Okay, so before we get to our send-off, thanks to the artist Max Oakland, who reached out and provided one of his songs for our intro song, I Prefer the Dusk. Let Max know you like it by following him on Twitter at Max Oakland with 3 Ds. And thanks to the author Stephen E. Scribner, author of the Tond Fantasy series, who makes music under the name S. Eric Scribner, for his song A Poem from the album Pianosphere. And we use that during the ad break. If you make music and you'd like your song used on the show, I would love to highlight a listener's work like Max's or Steven's songs, so email me about that. Thanks to Doug, the producer, for making this show sound good and taking the blame when it doesn't. Writers Not Writing is a production of NotAPipePublishing, so please go to NotAPipePublishing.com and check out the amazing books written by writers who didn't procrastinate too much. If you like this show, rate and review it wherever you found it. And please check out my novels and collections of poetry also. Even a very short review and a single click on that 5th star makes a huge difference to authors. So if you have 3 minutes, make somebody's day today. I am too old to tell you to smash that like button, but if you could gently tap on the like button for this show, I would greatly appreciate it. I want you to remember this week, as you enter into this last week of the election, if you are as stressed as I am, a book without spaces would be gibberish, and our lives need spaces too, so don't ignore the spaces. And no matter how much you procrastinate, I'm still proud of you.
If I take my time.